You can never forget what we drove up on. We drove up on a body that had the left shoulder and the head missing. You could see where there was a trail in this road, and the trail went from one side of the road to the other side of the road. Thought maybe it was a tire that was canted a little bit and was leaving rubber in the road. But once we got to looking, you realize that it wasn't rubber that was in the road. It was meat and flesh and blood, and with this long trail that we followed for a couple miles was actually part of a human being. You could see around the man's ankles that it was, you could tell he had been tied around the ankles, and we just started putting things together.
They made an announcement in church that told all the members to stay in your home, stay locked up, because there was an unknown body found in the road. We don't know what's going on in Jasper. And so it was a scary moment, but then at the same time we realized, you know, what happened. And then you can't come to reconciliation in your mind. To hear how he died, and the change came loose. They had opportunity to do the right thing. But instead, they had a mission. They tied him right back up to the truck and continued to drag him and left his body in front of Black Cemetery. And never in my wildest dream, I thought that she was killed in that way.
I had never been a part of anything to where you saw the results of pure hate. I didn't know people thought the way some people think. To kill somebody, to tie them to a truck and drag them for 3 miles with a chain, it's so far over my head. There's so much hate that's involved in that it's just kind of incomprehensible to me. And when I walked in to tell the family, Papa Byrd, Mama Byrd, they already knew. But we all cried together, we all prayed together. And I made Mr. Byrd a promise that we wasn't gonna quit till we got the people in jail.
When this case came up, the chief of police back in that day said, you're gonna ruin your career. You need to plea bargain this case. So you're talking about a country sheriff and a country DA going against all tradition.
We were doing what we were doing because it was the right thing to do, not because it was politically right to do it. It was pretty obvious the guy was being drugged behind this truck. We started finding pieces of evidence, started finding all kinds of cigarette lighter. And on this cigarette lighter, there was an inverted sign that we didn't know what it meant. It turned out to be an inverted Ku Klux Klan emblem.
They were in a Klan group called Confederate Knights of America, and it's primarily a prison Klan group.
Sean Allen Berry confessed to the district attorney and I at about 3 o'clock in the morning. He said that they went to F with an N, and it got out of control.
East Texas is very much the South. It's very much like Louisiana and Mississippi and Alabama. The old racial history was full of lynchings and killings. When I grew up, the community was very much segregated. They had white bathrooms and colored drinking fountains, and it was very much segregated.
We didn't have hate crimes then. It was not the word terminology hate crime. But I knew that there was a civil rights violation because they deprived him of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness because of his color. That's a federal crime. So I go to the FBI because I needed help. This country sheriff was in a bind, but it turned out that it was not a federal offense. And we prosecuted them in state court along with the U.S. Attorney's assistant. We did what we had to do to solve a murder case. It just happened that it was a black guy that was murdered and 3 idiot white people that murdered him.
sitting in that courtroom, it was very tense. It was very divisive. It was very, very unsettling, to say the least, to sit in the courtroom and watch that. We had division within the community, and that fear within the community just got worse because the long shadow of slavery still exists in our nation. It was not a very good time in this community. And we know right now by looking at our nation that instead of coming together, we're kind of pulling apart. But to watch the family, Mr. and Mrs. Jane Byrd, the mother and father, they had such grace. They had such forgiveness.
The Byrd family, to me, is one of the best examples of how you deal with a situation like this with dignity. I'm sure they were angry. I'm sure they were just grief-stricken. They were a marvelous example of how you deal with something like this in a very dignified way, and a way that really, I think, promoted justice being done.
You know, this is the first time in the state of Texas that a white man's given the death penalty for killing a black man. And it happened in a part of the state that's known for its racial history, and that's why.
I think America is divided now. We have a long way to go to come to that conclusion that we got to get better before we get worse. Because if we get worse, then America will not be the land of free anymore.
These things happen, and then life goes on, and we forget about them. And we can't ever forget that stuff like this happens. 20 years is not that long ago, and they'll happen again if we don't continue to remember them. The fact that there were 3 people who did that, and that doesn't reflect all of Jasper. But racism, I'm told, still exists in Jasper. I think racism exists everywhere, and I don't think Jasper's any exception. I think one of the most egregious examples of racism happened in Jasper. That doesn't mean that everybody in Jasper is a racist, but it does mean that it can happen anywhere.